We are almost done with writing equations of lines, but before we finish up, we're going to look at one more topic, which is writing the equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. And so in order to do that, we're going to need to know a slope. And so today we're just going to focus on how do we know the slope of a line that's parallel and a line that's perpendicular. And so let's look at a couple of examples to start with. Here we have two lines. Now, are these lines parallel or are they perpendicular? Okay, these are parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines are lines that don't cross. And so we want to figure out what the connection is between the slope of these two lines. So I want you to look at the red line here. What would the slope of that red line be? Okay, remember to find slope, we do rise over run. And so if we were going to find the slope of this red line, we would want to do rise over run. And so we would start down here. And if we went, we would go up 1 and go up 2. And then we would go over 1. And so we would say that the slope of that line would be 2 over 1. So for the red line, our slope is 2 over 1, which of course is just 2. Okay, what about the slope of the blue line? Go ahead and figure out what the slope of that blue line is. Okay, as we count on this blue line, again, we're going to do rise over run. And so if we start at the left point and go to the right point, we're going to have to count up 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. And then we're going to have to count over 1, 2 lines. And so when we're looking at the slope of the blue line, we would be saying that the slope of this blue line is going to be also 2 over 1, which equals 2. So when we look at these two parallel lines, how are their slopes connected? Well, they're the same. And so that's going to be true for any time we have parallel lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. So if we have two lines that are parallel, they have to have the same slope. Okay, let's look at the same idea, but this time let's look at another set of lines. Okay, so in our next set of lines, are these two lines parallel or are they perpendicular? Okay, these lines are perpendicular. Remember, to be perpendicular, the two lines have to cross not just any way, but they have to cross so that this is a 90-degree angle so that it looks like the corner of a square where they cross. And so that's what's going on here. These are crossing at a 90-degree angle or crossing at a perpendicular angle. And so we want to find the slope of these two lines. Now, the red line is the same as last time, and so the slope of the red line hasn't changed. The slope of that red line is still going to be 2 over 1. What is the slope of the blue line, though? Okay, so when we count the slope of the blue line, when we start at the left and go to the right, we go down 1, and then we go over 2. And so if we're going to find the slope of that blue line, we would say that the slope of that blue line is going to equal -1 over 2. Now, these are not the same numbers, obviously. They are connected, though, because first of all, what you'll notice is that 1 is 2 over 1, the other one's 1 over 2. When we have numbers like that, we call them reciprocals of each other. When they're just flipped over, that's called a reciprocal. And so perpendicular lines are reciprocals, but also notice that they have opposite signs. The first one was positive, the second one was negative, and so they're going to have opposite signs as well. So when we talk about perpendicular lines, we're going to say that they have opposite reciprocal slopes. Okay, so parallel lines, it was the same slopes, but with perpendicular, it's the opposite reciprocal, which basically, just remember, means two things. You flip it over and you change the sign. Now, there's a lot of lines that are not parallel and they're also not perpendicular. And if that's the case, there is no connection between their slopes. And so here's our example of two lines that are neither one. These two lines are crossing, but they're not perpendicular because, see, these corners here don't look like the corners of a square. Okay, they're more than 90 degrees or less than 90 degrees. When we look at these slopes, the red line this time has a slope of 2 over 2, which would be equal to 1. And so when we look at the red line, we would say that this red line, it's 2 over 2, which equals 1. What's the slope of the blue line? Okay, the slope of the blue line is going to equal -1 over 4. Because you go down 1 and over 4. There's no connection between those. The reason why there's no connection between those is because there's no connection between these lines. They're not parallel. They're not perpendicular. There's neither one. So just like there's no connection between their slopes. But in our lesson today, we're focusing on this idea of parallel and perpendicular lines. And so for your assignment today, basically what you're going to do is I'm going to give you a problem, and you're going to tell me the slope of either the parallel or perpendicular lines. So some problems will look like this. I'll give you an equation. So for this equation, y equals negative 1/6 x minus 7, what is the slope of that line? Okay, remember the slope is the number that is in front of the x, and so in this case, the slope of this line is negative 1/6. So if I want to find the slope of a line parallel to it, what's the slope going to be? Okay, remember, parallel lines always have the same slope. So if this slope is negative 1/6, then my answer for parallel is going to be the same exact thing. It's going to be negative 1/6. And so if whatever the slope is, it's going to be the same for parallel. Okay, perpendicular, remember there's two things you have to do. So what's the slope of the line that's perpendicular? All right, well, the two things you have to do is you have to change the sign. So first of all, here's our slope. It's negative 1/6. If we change the sign, it's going to become a positive. The other thing we have to do is we have to flip it over. So if you take 1/6 and you flip it over, it's going to be 6/1. And so our answer here would be positive 6/1. Now, you may not want to write positive 6/1. You may just want to write the number 6, and that is actually a better answer. It takes up a little less room. And so that's what we would normally say there. But remember, anytime we have something over 1, it's just equal to that number. All right, so some of your problems today are going to be like this. I'm going to give you an equation, and you're going to tell me what the two slopes are. Sometimes on your problems today, I'm going to give you 2 points and ask you what the slope is, and ask you what the parallel, and ask you what the perpendicular is. And so remember, when you're trying to find the slope, remember between 2 points, it looks like this. We still are thinking rise over run, but remember, to find the rise, you subtract the y's. To find the run, you subtract the x's. So giving our ordered pairs up here, what would your slope be? Okay, so to find our slope, we want to take 2 and subtract -8. So 2 minus -8 is equal to 10. Okay, then to find the run, we take 5 minus -10. Okay, when you take 5 minus -10, that's 15. So we get this fraction 10/15. Now you can reduce that. In fact, if you do reduce it, that's great. Divide them both by 5 and you get 2/3. However, I don't think it will count it wrong if you don't reduce it. So we could put 10/15 there, but I'm going to go ahead and put 2/3. So that's the slope between these 2 points. What would the slope be if it was parallel? Remember, parallel is the same, and so it's still going to be 2/3. And what would the slope be if it's perpendicular? Okay, remember, 2 things for perpendicular. You have to change the sign. So first of all, we're going to make it negative because it started off as positive. And then we're going to flip it over. So instead of being 2/3, we're going to make it 3/2. Now, if you notice on your problems, sometimes there'll be a thing down here that says written example. If you ever get stuck, that's a good thing to do, is you can just type that or hit that thing where it says written example. It's going to give you an exact same problem like this and show you how to work through it. And then hopefully you can go back and do the problem that you have in front of you. So use that written example there when you see it. So that's going to be some problems that you see as well when you give ordered pairs. And then finally, I'm going to give you some problems like this that are multiple choice. And in this case, it says which of these lines that are listed here are parallel to this slope. Well, remember, parallel, which one of these lines here would be parallel? Well, parallel has to have the same slope. So the slope of this line is -4/3. So if I want parallel, I want to find another one that has a -4/3 in front of the x. And that would be this choice right here. So this would be the one that we would mark. Now, if that had said perpendicular, which choice would you have picked? Okay, if it was perpendicular, we want to change the sign. So we want to look for one that's positive, and instead of being 4/3, we want 3/4. So if it was perpendicular, you would have picked this choice up here. That's our perpendicular one. But our one that we would have answered for this question is the last one, because that's the one that's parallel. Okay, so that's what you're going to be doing on your assignment today, is you're going to be working on these parallel and perpendicular slopes. So remember, there's just one thing to remember. You've got to remember that parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines, there's 2 things. Flip it over, change the sign. If you remember that, you should be good. But if you have any questions, make sure that you send me an email or contact me through Canvas Messenger, and I'll try to help you with it as much as I can. So that's all I have for you today. So good luck.